All right, get everyone in here. Get in here tighter. All right, everybody. We are going live. I just need to get my screen to come up here. Do that, Bray.
We had to do that last year.
And we're recording. Okay, I can do that. All right, everybody. First and foremost, I'd like to welcome everybody. Oh, we lost that, dude. Sorry, guys. Hold on 1 minute. I apologize. We are having a couple little small difficulties. We'll get it fixed in just a second. All right, we're ready to rock and roll.
Yeah.
New system, guys. New system. Okay, everything looking good to everybody? All right, perfect. All right, everyone. I'd like to welcome everybody for joining. We got a really packed house tonight. We appreciate everybody coming in for breaking down swim baits with myself. I'm Josh Douglas, and my co-host and good buddy and Bassmaster Elite Series Pro, Seth Feider.
What up?
And we have a very special guest. Seth and I have no problem running our mouths about anything fishing, but when we're going to put on something that's called breaking down swim baits, we need to bring in somebody who really knows what they're talking about when it comes to everything. And I'd like to introduce you to Eric Aske of Swimbait Universe.
Hey, folks.
All right, we're going to get through this. Here's how we're going to break it down quick. We're going to run through some things. We have urged questions. We love questions. We sit and we will try to answer as many of them as you can bring. Please mind you that some of the Q&A, we may or may not, other people may be able to see them, so please be polite when you're sending stuff in. And yeah, more questions we get. We're giving away some awesome prizes for anyone who's in attendance today. We'll draw it randomly and we'll get through them all. Seth and I are going to cover some of the smaller swim bait stuff and your tournament, more stuff geared towards regular everyday tournament fishermen. And then of course we got Eric here for the better part who will break down anything and everything when we're talking about the real swim bait. So let's get at it. A few things. Questions are urged if you're looking at a computer. Here's how you're going to ask your questions. You can hit the questions button up on top here and then submit the question there. That's from your computer. And computer users here, you can move around the video frame. We don't want it to be as in the way of our presentation. So if you don't like it or you want to get rid of it altogether, here's how you go about doing that. And let me just move that. Nope. Okay. All right, and then smartphone users, you can, anyone on their smartphone, question and answer on your mobile device is going to be down here in the bottom right-hand corner. Please keep them coming all during while you're having them. When Eric's doing his part, we'll try to sit down and break down questions as they come in. But again, at the end, we will definitely go through all of them. All right. This is from your mobile device too, as far as questions go. You can ask them here, and you can also you can leave it minimized, or you can get rid of it altogether when it comes to the video feed. Big prize packages this time coming around. We'd like to big time thanks to Daiwa. They're giving away a real sweet swim bait rod since this is a swim bait deal. One lucky person that's on today, we'll pick them at random, is going to win this rod from Daiwa. We really appreciate it. We'll announce the winner at the next webinar next month. Also, Dream Smasher. We've all been affiliated with Dream Smasher for a little bit of time now. Great baits, kind of a unicorn. People are having a tough time getting their hand on them because they've been perfecting this bait to a T. And we got both a gill and the shad that we are going to be giving away today as well. Each individual one, or two as one person?
Let's send them off separate.
We're going to send them off separate. So we got 3 lucky winners today that are going to get their hands on these baits or the Daiwa rod. Big time congratulations to Brady Johnson. You won our last prize pack from last month on drop shotting. Thanks a lot for coming on. We'll get this out. We'll notify you and get this off to you right away. All right, we're going to get into it now. We're going to talk about some of the demands for swim bait and tournament competition. You can see up, what started out west has slowly moved out towards the east and then up north. Up top, you can see your traditional, more your trout baits and stuff, your Huddlestons, the Castaic, stuff like that, that kind of paved the way back in the day. And now you got some of your more East Coast stuff here, like the gliding gizzard, and you got and then some smallie tackles, some little boot tails and stuff like that. And we're going to try to break them all down. Bait selection. This is more Seth and I's cup of tea. We're going to start with right away. Some of the baits that we use on the regular, you can see in the middle here, some Kitech, some Daiwa, Bass Tricks, Dream Smashers, all ledge fishing and covering flats. And of course, we got Eric. Eric keeps us in the loop as far as the must-have baits like the Depths 250s and the Hinkle Shad, the gliding gizzard, and all that kind of stuff. He keeps us in the loop, make sure we have the baits that we need to get those big bites while we're out there fishing. All right, first thing, let's talk about casting little paddle tails. Eric's gonna call it a grub later, and that's all good. He's gonna definitely start calling them grubs, but they all evolve from somewhere. And he's right. Technically, they're getting pretty small, and they're not what your traditional swim bait fishermen are going to be talking about. But I will guarantee you can catch 25 pounds on them any given day of the week. And if they're anything like a grub, they're much better now. That boot tail really brings in smallmouth. We'll break down kind of our presentations and how we do them. But in here, and you can see on this Navionics screenshot, this is kind of some typical stuff, huh, Seth? Some different reefs, stuff that you're going to want to attack.
Yeah, definitely a good swim bait water. Nice flats that drop into super deep water. Great places for smallmouths to hang out. Great places to cover with swim bait too. We're going to be talking about more of the smaller stuff for smallmouths, 3 to 5 inch swim baits, and largemouths, 4 to 7 inch swim baits. Mostly soft stuff, boot tail, stuff like that. Mostly fished on a jig head. Some are pre-rigged, but that's mostly what we're going to be talking about tonight.
Yep, and you can, all times of year, depending on whether you're going to be up shallow or fishing deep, you can really move these kind of baits around and attack all different kinds of water. Very, very good baits. As far as some of the bigger baits and going to largemouth, talking about structure is something that I've been able to do now with the Dream Smasher and stuff and other baits like that. Big fan of it. Seems like sometimes those fish get real pressured and you're really looking for a big bite. And some of these bigger boot tail baits or these bigger soft plastic baits like the Dream Smasher, Huddleston, stuff like that are very versatile. They can stay pretty weedless. And you can get them through some of the thick stuff. And here you can see on this screenshot, you're just looking at a normal point, and there's some bass stacked up on the outside. And this is exactly the type of terrain that I like to target. Use that Navionics map, figure out the areas where big fish are going to live. And I'm pretty sure Eric will break a lot of that down as far as putting these baits in high percentage areas where big fish live. This is some more stuff. Once we get on the map and we look around for these high percentage areas, then we're going to get in there and we're going to use, flick on some side imaging, some structure scan. We're going to really start breaking down the areas to make those high percentage casts. Here you can see in the bottom frame, you got a weed point with a rock pile on the end. That's going to be something that's going to be a big fish hole. That's something you want to throw those baits in. Up top, you got a creek channel, another area for big fish that right on that ledge for them to sit and eat. They got a lot of food, and these are big high percentage areas to throw a big bait looking for that bite. As far as my setups go, I use Daiwa. I'm really loving this Daiwa Steez XT swim bait rod. It's 8 foot long. It's got somewhat of a parabolic action, a lot of backbone on it. I actually am throwing this with the Dream Smasher. I'm using like 15 pound Seeger and Vizix fluorocarbon. I like to fish this bait real deep and get it down there. And that's why I like a little bit more bend in the rod to be able to load up on these fish and get them all the way into the boat. Another one underneath that is the Daiwa Tatula 7.6 Heavy. It's a flipping stick, but I use it for everything. I'll throw these big swimmers, these big bass tricks, stuff like that on like a hog farmer, swing head. Toss them around out on those ledges. That's kind of been a big deal for a long time. And that rod is a versatile rod. I can use it for a lot of things, but it's definitely got what I need with some 17-pound Seagram Vizex. And then I'm still, for the most part, I really like the spinning rod when it comes to throwing my really small little swimmers, like little Kitex, little Daiwa bait, stuff like that for smallmouth along reefs. I like that Outcast Money Jig is perfect on it. Rigs it up perfect. You can get either the 3 or the 4-aught hook for whatever size swim baits you're looking at. But I'm old school. It's kind of a Canadian thing to still use that spinning rod, and it's something I just like doing. But I do use a heavier rod. I go to the Tatula 7.2. This is a medium heavy. It's a stiff medium heavy at that. Something on a really long cast, I can still bury that hook in them really good and just keep coming to the boat with that Exist 3012. Get them all the way into the boat and keep them moving. Some Feider's tournament swim bait top choices.
Yeah, and I'm going to focus mostly on smallmouth is what I'm going to talk about. But this is a pretty textbook smallmouth stuff for me. Most of them, a lot of smaller stuff, just fished on a jig head, up to some medium-sized pre-rigged baits. Mostly boot tails. A lot of it's fished crawled on the bottom. I prefer a top hook if I can get away with it, if the bait's not too big, or it's something they can actually get all the way in their mouth for a smallmouth. I think that's the best landing percentage out of all of those. And a wide variety of baits I'm throwing here. I got my soft baits are Daiwas, and then the pre-rigged ones are kind of a hodgepodge of different baits that I've acquired.
One question somebody asked, Seth, and I'll leave this one to you right away. When it comes to any of these bigger baits, and Eric, you might know, smallmouth treble hook, bottom treble hooks, and being belly eaters a lot of times. You guys have any input on that?
Absolutely. Smallmouth are notorious for T-boning a bait from the bottom. So a bottom hook, slow sinking bottom hook bait can be a real key, especially when targeting smallmouth earlier in the year in the season when they're positioned a little higher up on the shallow reefs.
Okay, my setup's not a lot different than Josh's. For my bigger baits, I prefer a long 8-foot, fairly stiff rod. This is a medium heavy rod it's actually got a moderate bend, kind of lets those fish get a hold of that big bait a little better before you lay it into them. That's what I'm gonna fish all my bigger stuff with. And then my medium size stuff, jig heads with, 1/4 to 1/2 ounce. I actually throw on like a 7.7 moderate Tatula. I can get a super long cast and get a good hook set with a lot of line out there. And then for my really small stuff, basically 1/8 ounce or less 3-inch swim baits, I'm doing all that on spinning tackle with a braid and a leader.
All right. That's some of our quick stuff. Basically, we're going to sit back and let Eric take this thing from here. That's a lot of the questions people want to know. Again, urge any questions you have when it comes to the smallmouth setups or tournament fishing with some of these baits. Please keep the questions coming, and we'll get to them all. I'm going to take it over to my man Eric here. Swimbait Universe.
All right. Well, thanks for the intro, Josh. I'm going to break down a couple of different categories or general types of swim baits. You can see here we've got an assortment of hard-bodied swim baits, which really is kind of a broad category when you consider that you've got your glide baits like you see in the left column there. You usually have a single joint on them. There's a handful with an additional joint like the Jackal Gantarelle. But these are a bait that tend to swim in a wider S-shaped kind of motion, and compared to, for me, looking at them in the water and the way that they move, compared to almost any other kind of fishing lure, they look more like something actually alive, reacting to its environment like a real fish would, to me, than anything else. They're a blast to fish with. In the middle column there, you'll see some topwater baits, some wake baits. They've got a bill on them. Most of them have a bill on them, and your rat baits. These are great summertime baits, especially. And post-spawn baits, they've got tremendous drawing power. They make a lot of noise. They make a lot of commotion. You can fish them real slow and keep them in one area for a long time and really draw those larger fish up from deeper water and from heavy cover. And lastly, you've got your multi-segmented baits there. We can flip through the slides here a little bit, Josh. Got your multi-segmented baits there as well. And these, yeah, here we go. Thank you. And these will swim a little more linear, a little more in a straighter kind of a line, and sort of react and feel to the angler like you're fishing a crankbait. So it's not too terribly unfamiliar. They make a lot of noise, and again, they can draw fish from large distances. And when they get close, you can see the level of detail that is being put into these baits nowadays. Those fish get close to it, and the oldest fish in the waterway, the biggest fish around, is going to look at that, and they're not going to question what they're about to eat. It looks like something that they'd eat naturally day in and day out, which to me is one of the biggest advantages of fishing with swim baits. The reality is, since I've started fishing swim baits, I've been catching more fish than I ever have before, and a much larger average size. And I think that has everything to do with the fact that they see it in the water. It moves like the real thing. It looks like the real thing. And they've got no reason to question. They just eat it. We can move on to the next there. Here's back to the Topwater again. I kind of broke this down a little bit. These are your classic wake baits, and then at the very top, one of the baits that started it all. And we put it in the walk, wake, and crank down category. But really, the Lunker Punker by Black Dog Baits is the one that invented the glide bait with the side-to-side sort of walk the dog movement. Punker, of course, is a top water bait. It's a large bait, and it draws fish from a great distance, not a surprisingly deep water. The Baby Wake by 316 and the Wake Junior, its bigger brother, is another incredible bait that moves a ton of water, makes a lot of noise, and you'd be surprised the numbers of fish you catch on a bait like that. Go ahead and go on to the next there. And back to the glide baits again here. At the top, we've got the Depths 250, which is pretty much the pinnacle of the glide bait world, and it's the bait that most glide baits are judged by. It's a wide swimming bait. You can do a lot with it. You can change the weighting in it. We'll get more into some modifications as we go down the line here. But that's just an assortment of some of my favorite personal glide baits that I fish day in and day out. The Depths 175, the Rome-made Negotiator, Attic baits. These are all numbers baits. They're 7-inch class baits. You catch a ton of fish on them. Your larger glide baits like the Lena Deviant glider there, or Deviant Gizzard glider there, and the Depths 250, and your Hinkles and your Hiroshima Customs and your big Lena bluegills. You don't get maybe necessarily quite as many bites on these baits, but you get a lot of quality bites on these baits.
Now, if I could, I want to ask the first question.
Go ahead.
Because I'm probably like Seth, we're taking notes here as you're going through these deals. Out of all these, as a tournament angler, Seth, you got to admit it's kind of intimidating to throw something like this when time is so precious out on the water, right?
Yeah, for sure.
The Depths 250, obviously very popular. The Depths 175, which one's going to get bit more?
I would say the 175 is going to get a bit more.
Do you feel like the 175's got more of a place in tournament competition than a 250?
Yes and no, because yes and no. I think that there's a big advantage to throwing a 10-inch class bait, even if I was fishing tournaments still, and I used to, and you know that.
Oh, yeah.
If I was still fishing tournaments, knowing what I know today and the amount of fish that show themselves when you're throwing a truly large bait can really be a good indicator as to where the fish are positioned on a weed edge, for example. You've got a large stretch of seemingly featureless water. It's got a nice weed edge on it or a ledge to it or something like that, and you're combing that flat. Those big baits, the truly big baits, get a lot of attention. They get a lot of pushes, and you get a lot of follows where the fish never hits the bait, but they interact with it in such a way, and they reveal themselves to you, and all of a sudden you got a spot that you can go in there and start punching, or you can start ripping a shaky head through there or whatever and find out there's a large school of large class fish.
So you get them.
Definitely a great practice tool, I'd say.
I was just going to say.
You can definitely make some fish show themselves. Is there something you do for a backup rig when you're getting follows and not getting bites? Do you keep beating them with the swim bait? Or?
Yeah, I do. This kind of goes into a little bit of a larger subject that I was going to start delving into as we get into some of the slides showing different types of locations. But it was really a swim bait made for just about every application. From top water, super slow, to dragging the bottom at high speeds and everything in between. So I like to keep 6 or 7 rods rigged up with a different swim bait. I'll keep one rod in the boat. I'm not going to lie. I keep one flip and stick in the boat all the time. I always got a jig tied up. I'm not going to lie about that. But I'll keep a fast-moving topwater bait, a slow-moving wake bait, or barely subsurface bait. I'll keep 2 baits that I can tackle the sort of middle of the water column, 5 to 10 feet down. Again, at varied speeds, one that I can move more quickly, and one that I can really crawl through that depth zone, and a couple of baits that I can fish at the bottom. Again, one fast and one slow. So you can either appeal to the feeding response or the reactionary response of fish in those different levels of the water column.
Now, I saw you one time, a big bass followed you when we were fishing. Eric's taught me, Eric and Dave Sindrich, I got to give him some love, man. Have taught me so much about swim bait fishing and so much more to learn. But I saw you once, a big one following you, smacked the water. What was up with that?
I wasn't going to talk about that on here.
Talk about
I'm kidding. No, those larger class of fish really, when we're talking about fish that are into over 10 years old, teenage fish, these are experienced fish. They behave differently from your cookie cutter 2, 3, even 4 pound fish. They just have a different mentality. They protect their territory. They're very aggressive, and oftentimes it's not even just the one time. There's a reason that you saw me do it that one time, and it's because I've had enough experiences where I had that fish follow right up to the boat on a topwater bait or a very slow sinking bait. I saw that they opened their mouth up at the bait and went to set the hook and just pulled it right out of their mouth. Rookie mistake, like the first time he got that frog bite and didn't know what to do. But the fish didn't spook. It just sat there next to the boat. So in one motion, from going to set the hook and missing the fish and the bait's still in the air, smack that sucker back down in the water, and a lot of times that fish will turn around and just smash the bait as quick as it hits the water. Cool to watch. Really cool to watch.
We got to get that on GoPro one day, dude.
Yes,
we definitely got to get that on GoPro.
And it happens more than you think.
Soft body swimmers.
Soft body swim baits, I would categorize, generally speaking, if I was to break them into categories, I would say your hard baits kind of act more like your reaction baits. They can be tweaked to do different things, but a hard bait's basically a reaction bait for me. Soft bait's basically your finesse bait that you're getting more of a feeding response than a reactionary response out of the fish. And within the soft body category, there's a handful of subcategories as well in terms of the way that they're rigged, the types of tails that they have on them, etc. So we'll move on to the next slide here and talk a little bit about your typical paddle and boot tail. Josh and Seth, you guys pretty well covered this category already, but one thing I'll add to what you guys said is that truly, since these baits come unrigged for the most part, there's some top hook and some line through, but your unrigged paddle tails, you can really apply them to any imaginable application that you can even think about. It's really up to the angler's imagination as far as the limits go with what you can do with an unrigged paddle tail bait, from fishing it on top and letting it sit forever to rigging it to sink real slow and keeping it weedless and dragging it right through the mats, to put it on an 1.5 ounce shaky hood football jig and fast cranking it in 30 feet of water with boulders. So they're a very versatile group of baits, I'll admit. I don't fish them very often. I call them little grubs. But they get bites.
He calls them cute little grubs. He goes, they're cute.
They're pretty. We'll look at them.
All right. All right, I got one more. Somebody asked a question on this earlier. We have everyone from some hardcore West Coast hammers that know everything about this too. Some people that are just signing on because they are interested in swim baits. When it came to this, you mentioned line through, free rig, and unrigged. You want to explain what the difference is?
Yep. If you're looking here at the second bait down, for example, the Rago BVD Mini 3D, and the one right beneath it, your Matt Lewis Tournament Perch. These are both pre-rigged with weight inside of the bait and a top hook on them. They're both fairly fast sinking baits, and they're more or less ideal for bumping the bottom and fishing in a little bit of deeper water. At the very top there, you've got your unrigged hollow belly type of bait that we've just got it on a jig head. Happens to be I think that's a hog farmer swing head or something. What's it called? It's
hog farmer. It's like a swinging swim bait head.
Yeah, there you go.
He's gonna butcher me. That ain't probably the right name, but sorry, Scott, you'll get it. But it's a badass jig. Yeah, I'll tell you.
Think about how most jigs are set up, and that hook placement being far back in the bait like that. That's nice.
It's nice. I think they hold it better. Yeah. I was going to talk about it more a little bit, but I think they, even with the smaller ones too, it is a bait that they can shake. Sometimes it's that single hook and trying to get them out of deep water, and I think sometimes that leverage hook helps keep them on there.
Yeah, that flex hook would help with that a lot. That's the one of the few drawbacks to your typical pre-rigged jig hook type of bait. Is your hooking percentage is pretty good if they're eating the bait completely, but it is a bait that they can throw. You got to keep pressure on that fish, get it to the boat quick. That's why when you're watching those YouTube videos, those guys are always putting their rod tip down to the water and just crank as fast as they can and get that thing in the net. Because it's just one hook holding it in there. It's not a real great big hook gap on any of them, but they got to keep it sleek enough to come through the cover. So
and you're throwing the equipment to just put the winch on them and get them in the boat.
Just lock that drag down and go. Line throughs sort of tackle that issue. The whole reason why a line through bait was made is so that when the fish shakes its head or comes up and jumps, that bait can slide up your line and the hook breaks free from the bait. You stick a fish on a line through, it's coming in the boat.
You get them.
More or less. That's just the way it goes. And there's some pretty interesting weighting options that they can do with those different line through designs as well. So you'll have to look around and decide what's right for you and for your fishing applications as far as that goes. But that line through design surely does help to put some fish in the boat. Now we're going into the sort of your, this is our gill category here. All right. I'm a gill guy. We live in Minnesota. We've got very fertile waters, lots of vegetation, and a ton of bluegills.
No shad.
No shad.
No shad. We don't have
No
shad.
trout.
Right. No trout.
There's a couple.
There's a couple. Yeah, if you're living in the Midwest or you're living back east or anywhere where you got a lot of bluegills, you can rest assured those are high on the menu for bass. They live in the same areas all year round. They move with each other. They eat gills. That's just what they do. So these are some of my favorite baits that I've got tied on all the time. That finesse gill, 150 this year, put a lot of fish in the boat. That Matt Lures Ultimate Gill. I don't know that there's another soft plastic bait out there that looks as much like a real bluegill as that Matt Lures. Dream Smashers Gill has more of a vortex type of tail on it. I shouldn't use that word. It's sort of taboo.
We'll get into that too.
Yeah, we'll get into that, but it's that's a killer little bait as well. I'll just move on there. Now we're getting more into your vortex and sickle style tails. That Real Prey Mega Shad at the top is a new bait by Real Prey, and that thing is enormous and it is awesome.
I know Feider and I have been eyeballing that since the second you whipped that one out.
It is awesome. You can just barely slow roll that thing just under the surface, and the wake that it makes behind it with that tail, man, they're feeling that thing at a distance. That's a nice bait. But what's different about a vortex or a sickle style bait compared to your typical paddle style bait is that they're real subtle moving in the water. There's not a whole lot of tail wag there, but they move a lot of water. So when you think about the way an actual fish swims in the water, you don't really see them wiggling like how a crankbait wiggles. You don't see a whole lot of that. Not that that's bad, because that draws attention too, but when a fish swims, they usually kick their tail one time and glide a little bit, or they just kind of go along in a sort of a steady motion. That's what you get with a vortex or a sickle style or a HUD style tail, is a little more thump and a whole lot less exaggerated body and tail movement. And when fish are negative, especially when fish are negative, a lot of times that makes the difference in getting a look, getting a sniff, or getting a bite.
Good.
Yep. Modifications.
This is just a little something here. I've known Eric for a long time, and he is a modification doing mofo if I've ever seen one before. He can modify frogs, anything and everything. So this is a great topic for him to take here.
I've never been one to be known to just fish it out of the box. I don't go to the restaurant and just order off their menu.
He doesn't.
I don't want onions in it. I'm not getting onions in it. I don't want a treble hook on it. I'm taking the treble hook off of it. I'm putting a frog hook on it because I want to work it through the weed, which is one of my modifications, and a lot of guys know this about me. Some guys are chuckling right now, I'm sure. But bait modification is a pretty widespread topic in the swim bait fishing community, just because the baits are so finely tuned to be presented in a certain part of the water column. Guys like to adjust them to suit their needs and to sort of suit the habitat that they're specifically fishing in. The upper right picture there is just a bunch of depths 250s. No big deal. The very top one is
no big deal. I like it.
Well, there's a story. Everybody's heard of the Depths 250 slide swimmer. That and the 8-inch Huddleston Deluxe are probably the two most widely known and most widely productive baits in the swim bait community. The Depths 250 is something, the slide swimmer is something that was stumbled upon by accident. I don't know who exactly it was. I'm not going to claim to know that. I haven't been at it long enough. But if you're looking at that upper right picture there, there's the one that still has the bill on it. That's a Depths 250 silent killer, and that's how the bait was initially made. The bait has a soft skin on it, made out of silicone, like the same kind of silicone that your hollow-bodied frogs are made out of. And I don't know whoever had the idea, but someone had the bright idea to break the bill off of that bait and throw some extra weight in the belly section at the front of it. So rather than being a floating crank-down style bait, now it's a neutral or slow sinking bait, which completely changed the action altogether. It went from a tight riding little crankbait, not little, crankbait type of a presentation into arguably the most wild swimming, natural looking glide bait on the market. To do that, they break off the bill, pull the hooks off the bait, pull the skin off the front, throw a little bit of weight in there. I'm not going to give the magic recipe on how many grams to achieve XYZ rate of fall, but that's basically the gist of it. I go a little bit further, as you can see on the bottom kind of silver colored bait there in that picture, and swap out the treble hooks for a lighter weight, we'll call it cheap, because it is cheap, mustad frog hook. The reason that I do that is it shaves off just enough grams of weight off the bait to get it to virtually suspend or very slowly float. And because there's no front hook on that treble hook, it allows you to pull that bait right through dense vegetation and come through clean, which can be key. I couldn't tell you how many fish I've caught literally as I'm coming right over a mat of thick, dense milfoil, and it pulls off of that. And it's almost like the fish just sitting there with his nose sticking out, and he sees this bait fish come flying out of the weed patch and comes up and blasts it. It works awesome. It just works freaking awesome.
And hook up, no problem.
Hook up, no problem. You miss fish with the bigger bait you have, the more fish you're going to have pushing it and missing the hooks. Just because you've got that many more inches of bait compared to just 2 hooks on it.
Yep.
It happens. They roll on it, they push it, they bump it. I haven't noticed any negative result in switching to the frog hooks compared to what I ever got with treble hooks. I've actually caught more fish on it because now I can put it into places that you couldn't even think about putting it before.
Yep.
So, and one last thing too, if you notice the bottom 2 baits in the Depths 250 picture, one's real black colored, one's real silver colored. Those were the same bait initially. The silver one on the bottom was a real easy color modification. We just used some chemicals to clear out the black paint on the skin, and all of a sudden you've got a totally different bait. Little things like that are some of the things that guys like to do to alter the appearance of their bait. On the left-hand picture there, that's a Ryan 30-acre, excuse me, a Fish 30-acre, made by Ryan 30-acre, deluxe gill. This is not a billed bait. This bait comes with no bill, and this one was actually set up to be a floater. I went ahead and used one of my spare silent killer bills, as a matter of fact, off of the bluegill silent 250 in another picture. I actually used that bill and dremeled out a slot to fit it on the bait, and turned that floating bluegill into a crankdown bait, and swapped out the hooks just to finely tune the sink rate so that now it's a crankdown suspender. I'll tell you, I'm glad I did it because it's an awesome bait. That's just another example of the sort of modification that a guy might like to choose to do to change where he can put the bait and what he can do with it. On the bottom is the last picture here on the bottom is just a stinger hook mod. This is something that I've done because we've got a lot of smallmouth bass in our waters, which, as the name indicates, has a smaller mouth. So a lot of times they have a little bit of a hard time.
It's true.
It is true. They got a smaller mouth, and they have a hard time getting a big 7-inch bait all the way down. So what the rigs that I've got there, if we can put the cursor over, go right by the jig hook there. That right there, what we've got rigged up there is a little piece of 80-pound Seaguar Blue Label fluorocarbon leader material attached straight to the jig hook with just a little double barrel mini crimp. Got about 1 inch a leader, and it goes to another double barrel mini crimp to a little treble hook in the top of the bait. That rig put some giant smallmouth in the boat for me this year. Matter of fact, with Seth, that was a fun day.
Yeah.
I think we got a dozen fish my big 6 went something like 28 pounds, I think. Our total big 6 went like almost 30 pounds. It was stupid good. 5.5, 6 pounds smallmouth, and I wouldn't have caught any of them. The ones that have been on my soft baits, I got 4 on soft baits and 2 on a depths 175. I wouldn't have caught any of them if I hadn't had that stinger hook on there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I actually just dreamt that up on the spot too. I'm like, I've got my leader material. I got a treble hook here. What the heck? We'll just throw it together and bam.
You're great at that, though. I can remember with you and Dave Sindrich, and we were playing with HUDs when the weedless HUD first came out, and I thought that one maybe was when it first came, but when 5-6 years ago when I started throwing it and having some success on it, but missing fish. And when you miss a fish on a swim bait, it eats at you big time.
Yep.
You know, it's like, what is that? Especially,
Right.
you know, and you've been always a modifying fool right away, getting something to it.
Yep.
Before we leave modifications, I want to talk about one thing. Whenever I call you and Dave and anybody else who knows, a lot of times I'm asking, okay, I got some, I got some gliding gizzard, a gliding gizzard. Which one do I want? A lot of times you tell me to go light. Explain yourself to the people why they'd want to do it. Because honestly, you're getting ready to drop 150 on a bait. You can mod it and play with it more. And can you explain that to people?
Absolutely. It's easy to make a bait sink. It's hard to make a bait float.
Right.
Simple as that. The slower sinking the bait is, the angler is empowered to use suspend strips if you want to, or lead what do they call it? Lead coil material. You can coil up on the treble hooks if you want to. Bigger hooks you can do. Yeah, because the baits so many of them are so finely tuned. It's just a difference of 3 or 4 grams that makes the determination between an extra slow sinking bait to a slow sinking bait to a medium sinking bait to a faster sinking bait. So yeah, you can just swap out rings. Sometimes you can just put a split ring on the front of the bait where there wasn't one there before, or little small nuances like that can make a big difference in making it sink faster.
Perfect. Yeah. One last thing. Leaders. How about our Minnesota friends here? And I know we're going to do something later on your Facebook page or something and show people the type of leaders that you use.
Yep.
But maybe a quick explanation, because I guarantee you we got at least 30 dudes right now that are like, did he just say 150 for a bait? And which you do by no means, but anyway, I'm not throwing that in Minnesota when a 2-pound pike to take that thing. So
Right.
Go ahead.
No, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up because I think that toothy predators run rampant all over the country. There are very few parts of the country, in other words, I think, where there's almost no chance that you're going to encounter something with sharp teeth or sharp gill plates like a striper or like a walleye has, because they can cut your line with a quickness too. So what I did to combat that was started making my own leaders with no hardware on them, because I believe that with as finely tuned as the baits are made, they're supposed to sink at a certain rate. They're supposed to swim a certain way. You don't want to be adding a bunch of hardware to that equation because you're changing what your bait does. Doesn't mean it's bad. It just means you're changing what the bait does. So I don't like using prepackaged leaders that have a barrel swivel on them and a big old clasp on them and all that. I just buy a 30-yard spool of Seagar Blue Label, again,
Same deal.
fluorocarbon leader material. And I use it in 3 different breaking strengths for 3 different reasons. I use 50-pound, 60-pound, and 80-pound. And basically, the larger and heavier bait, the more stable swimming it is, generally speaking. So the heavier leader material that I'm going to use. Use the same crimps to close everything off on either end of them. Between the 3 different lines, I use one. Who makes that one? That's an Offshore Angler. Offshore Angler double barrel mini crimp. And the 60-pound test size will fit on the 80. It'll fit on the 60. It'll fit on the 50. That with a pair of locking pliers, and you can retie your rig more quickly than you can tie a Palomar knot, more quickly just about than you can even use a clip or a clasp.
I take you probably landed a few big toothy critters on before. Huh?
Oh yeah, it saved me many hundreds upon hundreds, probably thousands of dollars in baits. Yes.
Awesome.
There's no doubt about it. It's stealthy. It's lightweight. It doesn't change the sink rate. As a matter of fact, if you're throwing braid, it's less visible than your main line. There's nothing bad about it.
Well, speaking of that, let's roll into the line.
There you go.
I like it.
Yeah.
This is obviously going to be a big one. I still get confused on what I want when it comes to throwing some of these big baits and stuff like that. I go off what you say, so why don't you give it to them?
All right. first I'll put it out there like this, because some guys complain, well, it's not complain, they say, I've only got one fishing rod, I've only got one kind of line. If I had to narrow it down to one for fishing with swim baits, with large baits, it would be monofilament. No doubt about it.
Which one?
Which particular monofilament? I'm a big game guy.
Big game?
It's cheap, it's strong, and it's cheap and it's strong. You know.
I can pull Fighter's Dodge out of it. My Chevy can pull his Dodge out of the ditch with that.
Right, you got to way around.
Yeah, there are a lot of
new tires on there.
There are a lot of good options out there. P-Line CXS is a popular one. Where monofilament is ideal, especially is for topwater baits and baits that you want to keep high in the water column. Some people prefer using fluorocarbon if they're fishing in deeper water and want to keep those baits down. I use fluorocarbon to get my slowly floating baits to suspend several feet down. For example, this is one of my favorite things, a Matt Lures hardgill in a heavy floater fished on monofilament line will float with the lure's dorsal fin just barely touching the surface of the water. You tie that same bait on to 17-pound fluorocarbon with that leader material on there, and you make a long cast. You can kind of work it like a jerk bait with a sort of little cadence to it and get it to work down to 6 or 8 maybe feet of water, and that fluorocarbon bows up down there as you pause it and holds it down, and it's a true suspending bait, and that's pretty gross. I know.
It's awesome.
Yeah, you don't want that. Yeah, so I'll use it for that sort of an application. Copolymer is another popular choice. I've not used it. To be perfectly honest, I've never used copolymer line. Those people that I know that use it, most of them generally swear by Iserline. Again, I'm not terribly familiar with it. My understanding of it is it's kind of got a lower stretch like fluorocarbon, but it's a little more buoyant like monofilament. Is that right?
I don't know.
I don't mess with
I always kind of thought, neither do I.
Solid.
I think it's kind of a mix.
So we're all on the same page. We're some fish catching fools. None of the three of us know anything about
so there you go.
So there you have it. All right. Braid, for me, I don't honestly have a whole lot of love for braid when it comes to swim bait fishing. The biggest reason being, with a larger bait, you have to give that fish time to eat the bait. And if you've got especially if you've got a fast action rod and a line with no stretch to it at all, it's real easy to pull that trigger too quick and pull that meal away from the fish. They might have had it in their mouth, but they haven't closed their mouth yet, or they haven't turned their head yet, which gives you that advantage to get a hook set. So for that, I don't much care for it. However, there is a place and time for it, and I do use it for skipping docks and fishing heavy wood cover, basically just so you can force that thing around and get it in and out of there and drive that hook home. If the fish grabs it and swims 10 feet off to the side around a pole, you don't want any stretch there at all, so you've got opportunity to get a good hook set and know that your line's not going to get cut off on a zebra mussel on Minnetonka or wherever else. So soft baits and skipping and flipping large swim baits into heavy cover and around docks is about the only application I personally like braid. And there are certain wake baits. There's certain wake baits that I like to have the control that you get with having no stretch. When you do a little twitch with your rod, you know exactly how many inches it's moving on the other end. Certain baits when I want to keep it in the strike zone for a long time, but making a lot of noise, like with a Wake Junior by 316 Lure Company, sometimes I'll fish that on braid for just that reason.
And for anybody out there right now that's second guessing my man, talking about, oh, that bait's too expensive, I'm gonna throw it on braid, I guarantee you it's the number one that'll cast it off, break it off, and send that thing flying is going to be braid. So
that's
don't think so tight. I can tell you from the rigging days and all that kind of stuff, nothing snaps off and goes flying 200 yards better than braid does. So just remember that.
That's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. That's exactly braid has probably cost me, cost me about $1,200 in cast off depths 250s. Happens that I was using braid at that time.
Let's talk about where you're fishing them at.
Yeah. So this is a kind of a classic little shot of what we got going on up here in the North Country. What we're looking at here is sort of a spawning flat. It's a northern bank. It's got a wide area of shallow water. On either side of it, we've got an inside turn where that break pulls in tighter to the bank and creates a natural funnel. Those funnels are natural fish holding spots all year round. They might be up high on it, they might be down low on it, but if they're moving from point A to point B, they're going through that spot. And it's just a matter of time before you're going to intersect with them. Not to mention those spots, and I heard you guys talk about this in one of your more recent webinars as well, is that for whatever reason, those tend to be a little bit harder bottom spots with a little bit sparser weed growth as compared to the main stretch of a weed line. And because of that, it makes them real good spots for moving baits and reaction baits fished overhead. So those are the types of those are a go-to spot for me, and really they can be good for any sort of bait you'd want to put in there, because you've got deep water on one side, shallow water on the other side, maybe weeds to the top, maybe clean to the bottom. So that might be a kind of a sort of a kitchen sink sort of spot. And then you've got your
I like it.
Hello, Chad.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you've got your deeper inside turns as well, which you can see kind of the two bottom arrows down there, and there's a rock pile, a little sort of shallow hump off the edge of it. Same thing. It's just a transition spot when you've got that little widening in the break there. What we're looking at here is sort of a more nondescript outside break situation. Fish can set up on the tips of those points sometimes, or they'll be sometimes balled up down on the inside turns like I was talking about. But when you've got a nice long stretch like that, this is a sort of area where there's some good depth under it. You can sort of parallel it and keep your bait in a certain strike zone. These are the types of spots that will opt for more of a crank down sort of a bait, like that 30 acre that I put the bill onto, or for a finesse or feeding style reaction, going to more of a HUD type of a bait, Huddleston Deluxe Swim Bait or somewhere, or a paddle tail, I guess, if that's your deal.
One thing I'll say though is these anything vertical, that's where a lot of success that I've had with the bigger swim baits always came around vertical water for me. It just seems like there's where big fish hang out. And one thing I can say, and the little I know about the big swim baits, and I throw them, I made it a promise to myself that I'll always have a big swim, not like a paddle tail, like a big swim bait, like the depths or something like that on my deck at all times. Because one day I'll get that opportunistic bite that'll be all the difference. But nothing flows so confident through the water than some of these big baits do. And that is something that I know just drive big fish crazy. If something comes through there and it's confident, it gets eaten. If they tend to choke it out, and that's just something that they're not used to big fish doing that, bait fish doing that. They're going to eat it when it comes through there, and it's just a little too cocky, a little too confident coming through.
That's a good point. That actually kind of goes along the lines of one of my old sayings, which I've said for years, and that's that there's no better prey than injured prey. Everybody knows that, or distracted prey. And a fish that's swimming along so confidently obviously has no idea it's being tracked or it's being stalked by a large predator, or that it's encroached on that predator's territory.
Yep.
And that'd be distracted prey. That's what I'd go for if I was them. Aha.
This should have been under mods. We kind of got it swapped in there a little bit.
This is the ultimate and probably the most well-known modification out there. That's our man on the bottom there, Butch Brown, showcasing his Butch Brown rig. I hope I do justice to the description of what he does to make a Butch Brown rig. Some people think it's just a matter of cutting off the top jig hook off of that Huddleston Deluxe and just attaching a treble hook by whatever means they want to that line tie. It's not. It's a lot more specific than that. He very specifically uses 7-strand wire and a crimp and a particular hook, which I believe is a VMC round bend bronze finish. I want to say size 1. Don't quote me. I might be wrong. Pretty sure it's size 1 hook, which he trims down. You can see in the upper left picture there. He takes one of the prongs on that hook and cuts it down to about a 1/4 inch and puts a bend to it so that he can sort of fit that piece under the soft skin on that Huddleston and wedge it in between the soft skin and the hard internals. For those that aren't familiar, the Huddleston swim bait, Huddleston Deluxe swim bait, is set apart by others in that it's got an actual hard urethane flotation device inside of it, which is encapsulated by soft plastic. So by doing that little hook mod, that anchors the hook in place, keeps it on top, keeps it nice and neat and tidy. And the advantage there is that it's stealthy looking in the water. It's a relatively smaller looking hook than what the jig hook was. And like a line through, it breaks away from the bait when the fish bites it and shakes its head, which makes it so that the fish can't get leverage against that large bait, or is less likely to get leverage against that large bait, and it'll help you actually put that fish right in the boat. And that's what that's about.
Good.
That's our man.
Let's talk about what you're throwing this pig stickers.
All right. Yeah, these are, I've got quite a handful of swim bait rods. These ones stood out to me as some of my favorites to fish with. At the top, you see there the Okuma Shadow Stalker 8.6 extra heavy. This is what I throw my largest baits on. The Depths 250 I throw on it. I had a whole lot of fun this year throwing that Lima Glide crappie. Unbelievable bait. And that rod is really a lot of fun to fish with. It's not terribly heavy. It's got a parabolic bend to it. You can really launch a 5, 6, 7 ounce bait about as far as you want to launch it, but it still loads up nice on a 2 3/4, 3 pound fish. The reel there is made by Okuma, called the Komodo 364. This reel is a workhorse. I mean, I've had it for 3 seasons now. I'm tough on my stuff. I've not even bothered to lubricate it. Maybe I shouldn't tell that to Mike and Mark, since they're probably watching, the boys at Okuma. But it's still kicking. It's kicking strong. It fishes like it's brand new out of the box to this day. I think the drag test on it, the pound test and drag on it is like 18 pounds or something. It's crazy. So you can lock it down. You can winch in the biggest of fish. That rod I've almost always got rigged up with Berkeley Big Game 25-pound monofilament line, which has got the strength and the stretch that I need to make sure I'm not going to cast that bait off, for one. And for two, it's got the strength to get those big fish to the boat quickly. Next rod down is Dobbin 795 Mike Long swim bait rod. The rod has a exceptionally strong long handle on it, which I like. A longer butt section like that allows you to, for me, you get a lot more distance out of my cast, and it's comfortable to tuck up under your armpit like the swim bait guys like to do, which helps to alleviate the stress of holding a big heavy rod and reel combo throughout the day, tucking under your arm, and you're set to go.
I thought it was a tuna rod. You had to put in the chair when I grabbed it.
Actually, the Shadow Stalker is a
It's huge.
Rod. It's
yeah,
actually
huge.
it's a jigging rod for tuna. It happens to be a great swim bait rod. But yeah, that Dobbin 795 is a nice plank. It's a lightweight rod. It's a kind of a moderate fast action rod. Great for your baits in the 2.5 to maybe 4.5, 5 ounce range. So that's one that I use day in and day out with my soft plastics, like the weedless HUD you see in the picture there. On the bottom is an Okuma Guide Select 711 medium heavy. This is a soft blank rod. Loads up great. You can make long casts with it. It pairs up awesome with all sorts of different baits. One of my favorite baits to throw on that rod is a Matt Lures, or really any other 2, 2.5, 3 ounce class bait. On both of those last rods, I pair them with a Shimano Curado 300 EJ. I've been a Shimano guy forever. It's just how I've rolled. They do need some maintenance annually. You got to lube them up a little bit, but as long as you keep them lubricated, they'll last you a lifetime. They're strong reel. They're lightweight in the hand. They fit in the hand like a 200 series reel, and they're just a joy to fish with. That power handle that they come with, and a lot of companies are starting to go to power handles now. I like that a lot for swim baits because you're using a relatively long and usually relatively heavy rod. So it's nice to have that big handle on the reel, which allows you to sort of do your jerking motions and work your swim baits like it's jerk bait. You'd be surprised the amount of movement you can get out of a bait just by manipulating the reel handle, and that power handle helps with that a lot. That rod I keep rigged up with fluorocarbon, same thing, so I can suspend those Matt Lures floaters, and so I can keep those paddle tails, which I actually fished this year quite a bit. It's a big one though. It's a 7.5 inch paddle tail. It's a big paddle tail. My friend Rhett Wheeler makes that bait. It's called his burner, and that's rigged on a 1 3/4 ounce or 2 ounce, 1 3/4 ounce shaky head football jig by Hog Farmer with that little stinger. Oh, it's badass. Yeah, badass. Gets down those rocks and just stays down there. And that parabolic rod really keeps them stuck. And the fluorocarbon line with a little stretch, you know you got that bite right away as soon as they bite it. it's just a great combo altogether.
You know, and another thing too about you basically essentially got a football head with a hook capable of rigging this big paddle tail, and it is a big paddle tail.
It is.
A lot of people don't associate dragging these things around. We always on our football jig want something that's very, you know, got a lot of action to it. You drag it around. That paddle tail really boots when you're dragging that thing across rocks, kill it, bring it back, and you hop it up, and then it has kind of a slow fall as it catches itself again on that paddle tail.
Yep.
Killer bait no matter where you go.
Yep. No doubt about it.
You good here?
Yep.
All right. Here we go. We're going to get into questions. Again, this webinar was recorded for any of those that have to work and, of course, can't be on here. Life goes on and all that. I know it gets dark early now, so we're definitely pulling in a lot of people for these. But they're always recorded. You can view them on YouTube. And to find it easy, too, you can check on my website at joshdouglasfishing.com. And you can click the video vault, skip past the videos to the webinars, and they are listed in there in order. But remember, you do need to be on live to win, obviously, to win any of our prizes. We're going to have some awesome prizes coming soon. Next webinar, we're going to get into questions here in just a minute. This is where we're going to open it all up to everybody, and just let's hear it. We got a good hour under our belt already. Now we're going to hear what all the questions everyone else has. But please, Feider and I are about out of here.
Yeah.
It's Florida time. It's
time to go catch some bigs.
It's time to go start flipping and pitching and punching and all that kind of good stuff. Shallow vegetation. We're going to have a lot of stuff to talk about, different baits, rod and reel combos, what you're looking for, photos, video, the whole nine. Bring it on there and have some fun. So that'll be the next one. Please.
Quick. All I see right there is a Depths 250 with frog hooks on it. That looks awesome.
And that's where me and him are different. But it'll get bit. I guarantee it. Maybe.
Damn right it will.
I know it will.
They damn sure don't see it every day down there, though.
No, they may not have ever seen that. That's a good call, for sure. All right, we just want to say some thank you. Bassutopia, Dr. Sonar, Bass East, Classic Bass, bunch of companies out there, media outlets that support us, that share this to let people know we're doing this. And I got the look on my wife Bree's face. We got questions, so I'm going to skip right to everything. Navionics, thank you. Navionics sponsors these deals, puts it out there for everybody. And big thank you to them for doing that. Obviously, this gives us a stage to be able to get out and talk to people. And like for Seth and I today, we learned something. We weren't just talking. Seth got to drink a couple extra swigs of beer today during this webinar. Again, all questions, please email us any questions. Contact Seth and I. You can see our email addresses here, Facebook, any of that kind of stuff. We try our hardest to keep in touch. And any of these questions we have from you or suggestions, we try to take into future webinars. We're going to keep these things coming. And I believe the one following this one will be on the Thursday night before the Classic, Bassmaster Classic.
Yeah, we're coming to you live.
We're going to bring it from the Classic. We're bringing new gear. We're going to just do it kind of improv.
And we got a brand new Daiwa reel that isn't even out yet. We're going to give away for that one, so check it out.
Dang.
We're going to rock and roll. It's going to be a big one. We're bringing the free stuff so we don't mess with nobody while they're actually watching it. So, questions. Let's do it. I can't read it from here. All right.
No, that's left.
This one? Guys, bear with me 1 second. All right. What is the most important feature in picking a swim bait? Tough question.
That's a broad one. But you know what? It's actually really not. Swim bait fishing is not a golden ticket. It's not magic. It's no different than regular fishing in that what's best for you is what's best for you. You fish to your strengths, you fish to your confidence, and the results will follow. Every swim bait out there will pretty much more or less catch fish if you put the time in on it. So if I was to give advice to somebody who's never fished a swim bait before, I'd say go to monsterfishing.com, go to tacklewarehouse.com, go to an online retailer, or go to Swimbait Universe where you can learn just about anything you want to know about swim baits and start looking around. Pick something that you like the look of, that fits to your fishing style.
And the forage that's
and
around.
the forage
your
that's
matching
your,
forage
exactly
perfectly.
so matches your forage. You live in a bluegill area, load up on some bluegill baits. You live in a trout stocking area, get some baits that imitate trout, so on and so forth. It's the best advice I can give to someone new to the game.
Boy, Dougie.
All right. Sorry, guys. My thing jumps every time I do that. Every time a new question, we got a lot of them to get through. You guys an ice king? That's funny. No, we ain't no damn
ice fishing going on around here.
All right. I live in Ontario, Canada, and I want to start throwing swim baits, but we don't have absolute giants like you guys have down south. Mind you, we're in Minnesota.
Right.
We're not down south, but we do throw them down south. So,
yeah, I mean, for any of your smallmouth needs, those little boot tails work pretty good. But even on the big glide baits, I mean, if a fish thinks it can fit it in his mouth, he'll take a shot at it. I mean, how small of a bass have you caught on the depths 250?
Smallest bass I caught on a depth 250 was about 1.5 pounds.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I mean, everywhere in the country's got 3-4 pound bass, so there really ain't a bait too big to fish anywhere you are in the country, even in Canada.
All right, Bill McCown asks, do you have a preferred water temperature or season of the year to throw different swim baits such as Huddleston, triple trout, line through paddle tail, and the depth slide swimmer?
You know, not really. I've caught fish on all kinds of swim baits and all times of year. And here's my way of thinking on it. Fish are either in an aggressive feeding mood or they're in a negative feeding mood. Fish are always in shallow water. Fish are always in deep water. If you have your baits rigged up correctly, you've got an arsenal on your side, you got a handful of rods that can cover each part of the water spectrum in different sorts of habitats. There's a swim bait that's right for any given moment, and you might just find yourself surprised. Historically, your HUDs and such are more of a cold water bait, where a paddle tail might be considered more of a warmer water bait. And maybe that has something to do with the fact that a paddle tail has a more exaggerated swim to it and is kind of more like a reaction bait. And the HUD is a little more of a finesse sort of a presentation that might get a negative fish moving. But I don't like to put my mind in a box in that way and say ABC bait's good for cold water or XYZ bait's good for warm water, because all it has to do with is fish behavior and fish positioning and location. Anybody disagree with that?
Nope, you sounds good to me.
Yeah.
All right. What size line do you use for a Huddleston?
Depends on the Huddleston.
Well, explain.
6-inch HUD. I don't know. You get away with 14, 15-pound test or a 30-pound braid or something. 8-inch HUD. You're going to want to beef it up a little bit to 20, 25-pound. They've got the new 10-inch HUD. You're going to want to be rocking 25 or 30-pound test on that bad boy because it's probably like an 8-ounce bait. And you got to be able to move it inside of the mouth of a fish that's clamping down on it. So I would say, generally speaking, for baits like HUDs, 15 to 30 pounds, depending on the size of the bait and where you're putting it.
All right.
If we're talking about braid, then I'd beef that right up to 65 or 80-pound test. But if you're talking about mono or fluoro, 15 to 30-pound tests will pretty much cover any swim bait need you have, and just go proportionate based on the size and weight of the bait.
Right on. Here's one, Feider. I'm sure we can answer this one. Feelings on fishing a paddle tail with an underspin head. I actually like it. I used an underspin on a paddle tail, like on lakes like Beaver, Table Rock, around boat docks and stuff like that. Pretty awesome.
Yeah, the underspin's kind of a spotted bass deal more than anything.
Sure.
Highland Reservoir, super clear water, cold water, winter, early spring, late fall. That's kind of where that underspin shines. But a lot of time when I'm fishing smallmouth, I do a lot of bottom bounce with mine. So just a standard jig head works pretty good for most of the stuff I do. And then that underspin really shines more on suspended fish. Yeah,
and another thing too with the underspin with the paddle tail on it, I know the standby always back was like a fluke. I think when the water gets a little dirty, when they run it a little dirtier, it's a great bait too because it's got a little more kick, a little bit more action for that underspin. And it can call them out. So definitely a good call. Rob asks, I live in Wisconsin. would like to get some bigger hard baits. What ones hold up better to the northern hits?
I haven't really seen a bait that doesn't hold up to it. I think most of the time when a bait doesn't hold up to a fish, it's because the angler is overpowering the bait and has their drag locked with 80-pound test line, and they've got a bait that's got, you know, a 40-pound bend out strength split ring on it, or a light wire hook. I don't think that there's a fish out there that's, with most of the swim baits that you see for sale anywhere, where the company stays in business for any longer than a few months and is producing baits. I don't think you'll be able to find one that a fish is going to bite it and break it. Other than a soft bait with toothy fish.
I was just going to ask that. That was the one that I was going to say. I was looking through a couple of yours. You got a couple of them to the razor blade.
Oh yeah, I'm not going to lie. I've probably only ever owned a total of maybe 20 HUDs in my life, and I'll bet you a dozen of them, the tail got bit off before I caught a fish.
But still, I believe he was asking about hard baits.
Yep, he was asking about hard baits.
And generally, even though the soft baits seem to be a little bit less expensive and more easily replaceable than some of the hard ones.
Yep, very much so.
Figure out where we're at here, guys. Their questions are coming, and I really want to get through all these. Is it important to use a scent on your swim bait? I remember Byron Velvick when he won that one. He was buttering the toast, baby, on that bait. I think it's a big deal.
Speak more to it, but even more so than the scent, I think the big deal was getting some lubrication on the plastic for moving that big soft bait through the fish's mouth. Kind of greased it up a little bit, but I'm sure you can talk to that a little more.
No, you're right.
I know you're a scent guy. You taught me a lot about scent right away, even on a bait like a frog.
I'm all for it on anything.
I am too.
It ain't going to hurt nothing.
Definitely
That's exactly right. Bill Dance taught me early on when I first started loving fishing, taught me that the more senses you can appeal to, the better. So yeah.
Right on.
If it gives a small chance of turning a sniffer into a biter, then what the heck?
Fighter, Ron Knight asks, in your previous drop shot presentation last year, you mentioned high vis yellow seeger.
No, it'd be suffix braid.
Yeah. We never met. No, none of us did. Anyway, it says, Ron asked, in your previous drop shot presentation last year, you mentioned high vis yellow seeger smackdown and 20-pound, almost impossible to find. I don't even know if it is.
No, I use Suffix 832 braid. It's probably the best casting braid on the market. Comes in a variety of colors. I prefer the high vis just because I can see it better, and I'm tying a floral leader to it anyways.
And I'm close. I've used Suffix. It's great. I'm really liking the Iowa J braid right now. You should be able to find all that. I believe that's out in stores now. I'm ready to rock and roll. Eric Sangbo is asking, when do you choose a jointed swim bait over a non-jointed?
Kind of covered that a little bit. I don't really box myself into that. I'll cycle through them all in the course of a day, and once I start getting a reaction to one or the other, formulate a pattern based on that, hopefully, and move forward. But generally speaking, I guess a non-jointed bait, you're talking about a soft plastic bait, that's something that'll appeal more to a finesse style feeding reaction. And a jointed bait is generally more of a reaction based bait that you might work a little bit more quickly. So I like to use them both to figure out the mood that the fish are in, and then sort of tailor my style for that day to the moment.
Anonymous asks, I like this question. What's the appeal of a soft swim bait slow rolled on the bottom? Easy meal. Hell yeah, it is, dude.
Super realistic.
Yeah. Kicks off a lot of action. That tail comes through there, and it looks like a dumb shad making a wrong mistake. I mean, for sure. Absolutely, it does. When fish are in shade looking into light, what color swim bait would you go to? Ooh, I don't know.
Say that again. I wasn't listening.
Okay, when fish are in shade looking into light, what color swim bait would you go to? So say they're in a dock. Yeah, you following it?
I'm going to answer this question with a question.
Well, we can't.
I know we can't answer.
Oh.
It's a rhetorical question, no less. What does the bait fish look like in the water?
All right, Brandon, you heard it.
Naturally eat.
Brandon Armstrong, I'm looking for your response to that one. What do they look like? Robert Messer, what about spots? Are they able to consistently take the hard baits like Swavers 200?
In Northern California, I think so. The rest of the country,
And smallmouth too.
yeah.
They are gonna piss you off all day, I can tell you that.
The problem, and you can answer this, they make smaller glide baits, and I've tried messing with them, and they really don't have the action that a big glide bait does. You know, some of those smaller 5-6 inch glide baits that, you know, look like they'd be a nice size for a smallmouth or a spotted bass. They really don't have the action that the big glides do.
That's very true. But the beauty of it is they don't need to be able to choke that bait anyways. Yep. They need to be able to choke that hook. That's all they need. Smallmouth bass and spotted bass, what they might lack in mouth size, they make up for tenfold in attitude.
Yeah. I watch you catch plenty of big smallmouths on a depth 175, and I mean, they'd have a heck of a time getting it in their mouth, but
they sure tried.
Yeah, and they got a hook in their mouth.
You got that right. A frog hook. No,
yeah.
Too.
God,
that was fun.
Okay, hold on.
It was a great time. We're gonna do it again next year.
Yeah.
Yeah. As long as the Twin Pines don't eat them all.
Yes.
Eric.
Yeah.
Jason asks, looking for your hits on walleye. Anything that comes to the top?
I've actually caught quite a few fish on the quite a few walleyes on the Dream Smasher 6-inch shad. Believe it or not. And if you're a walleye fisherman, you're probably familiar with the term snap jigging, and that's kind of how I've been able to pattern them. I'll let that bait flutter all the way down to the bottom, and the Dream Smasher, the way that he's got them weighted, or that they've got them tuned, is on the drop. Their body kind of wiggles, sort of like a rattle trap or another bait like that. So fishing deeper rock spine type spots in the middle of the summertime, right in the middle of July, in the heat of the day, more than once I've been able to pattern large walleyes on that Dream Smasher bait by ripping it up and letting it fall to the bottom, and ripping it up and letting it fall to the bottom, and you get that smack. I haven't caught a lot of numbers on other swim baits as far as walleyes, but I'm not really out trying to catch them. And in fact, the handful of times that I've gotten them good fishing deep rocks, I wasn't targeting them then either. I was fishing for bass, like always. But I don't think that's really any different. They're just another predatory fish. So as long as you're putting something in their environment that looks like something that they would eat in their environment, they're going to eat it. Honestly, throwing big baits like that all day long, I could care less if I'm catching bass. I just want to catch fish that are big enough and aggressive enough to eat that large bait. And a lot of times that ends up being pike or muskies, or in this case, walleye, just because we're fishing deep in water.
My S-Waver, William Barkley, my S-Waver hookup ratio is poor at best. I've switched to ST41s. Any tips you can give me? I'm throwing them on a 7.6 Veritas medium heavy cranking rod.
Veritas rods, I think, I'm not familiar with the cranking series, but the last Veritas that I fished with was a pretty fast action rod. You might look at if you're not already fishing mono, switching to monofilament, so you've got that give, you've got that stretch in the line, which will help to allow the fish to eat the bait, and a softer rod blank as compared to a faster action rod blank for the same reason. It just causes just that extra split second of delay between you swinging your hand and it connecting to that fish's face can make all the difference in the fish closing its mouth, turning its head, etc., and actually getting a hook in it rather than a bump.
Christian's asking, line conditioner on fluoro.
I messed up a little bit. I didn't think it really made much of a difference.
No. Line it up.
No.
How would you rig? Benny is asking, how would you rig a reaction ovation skinny dipper for fishing around cover? Well, they make hooks. They make belly weighted hooks. That's one way to go about doing that. It's got like a spring on the top.
Like a screw lock?
A screw lock, yep. Belly weighted. Something lighter to fish shallow cover. Sometimes just like the 4-aught hook and the little weight on the nose hook. Yeah. That's a good way to do it.
I don't know who makes it. I think was that Paycheck that makes it. It's that little bullet weight screw.
Yeah, that's cool.
It doesn't weigh anything. It's plastic, but like anytime you're fishing like eelgrass or wild rice, stuff that's like impossible to get anything through, that bait comes through that really good. And yeah, it's actually a pretty good swim jig trailer too. So
right on,
there's a few ways you can fish that bait.
Absolutely. For smallies, Rob is asking, for smallies, do you usually use soft body baits or do you use hard baits also?
Both are effective. I typically choose the paddle tail on a jig head type baits. I get a ton of bites on them, but me and Eric went out this fall on Lask, and he definitely did his share of catching on big glide baits and a few other big hard baits.
And to add to that, that brings up a little small topic that I didn't mention earlier. I've got a certain way of attacking deep water with hard baits that I don't know if a lot of guys are doing it. We talked to a few guys about it out west, and some guys are starting to cash some paychecks in tournaments doing it. But there's a rig that I shouldn't say I developed it, because I really didn't. It's just a 3-way rig, but I call it a swim shot rig, where you basically have a situation set up real similar to a 3-way rig. You've got your main line coming down to a knot, and from that knot, you've got a leader going to the bait and a drop line going to a weight. So it's sort of like a drop shot rig, sort of fishes like a Carolina rig. And I like to use a setup like that with about an ounce weight on it or an ounce and a half weight on it, depending on the size and buoyancy of the bait that I'm throwing. But for deep water fish, and particularly smallmouth bass, a depth 175 or Attic Baits light reel floating glide bait is a great choice to put on a deep water rig like that, and you can really get some tremendous results fishing a reaction bait like that. And then pausing it, and you pause it and just let it sit there and soak, and just soak and then soak, and then you just twitch, boom, boom, there it is. Yeah, and you can definitely get a reaction on a fish that might have turned their nose up to a little more subtle bait.
One thing I want to say real quick, guys, if I could, I'm just kind of looking through the chat portion, and there's some more questions on there. We'll try to get to some of those. But there's also a lot of good comments coming from after our answering questions from people, just going back and forth through there. Really good stuff on the chat line, too, for those that want to check that out.
Also, that's something that interactive users are able to view as well.
I believe. We're getting used to this new format.
Very cool.
I just want – this is great, Brian. Thank you so much. This is not really a question, but thanks for doing this on a non-Wednesday night. I never miss one of your webinars, but missed the last one because it was a Wednesday. You guys are really the best of these. Thank you. We'll try to send us that feedback. If you don't like that night we're trying to work around Monday Night Football, and now that's done with the playoffs.
Mondays haven't.
We're great.
Everybody's doing stuff on Mondays.
Mondays are tough.
We're keeping it Tuesday through Thursday. I mean, if we get a response to somebody.
Yeah, if we hear enough of it, we'll give it a try. As long as the audience is showing up.
It'll be between Tuesday or Thursday, either way.
But we appreciate it, Brian. Thank you so much. We really do appreciate it. What type of setup do you like to use for throwing your 2 to 3 ounce gill baits? You didn't have the gill bait, did you?
I like that.
Did you have a picture of a gill bait on your setups?
No, but that would usually be something that depending if it's a hard bait or a soft bait, I'm either going to throw that on my 7-Eleven medium heavy Okuma Guide Select swim bait rod, which isn't a typical medium heavy. It's medium heavy for a swim bait rod, so it really translates to like a mag heavy or something like that. If I'm throwing a hard body bait, I'm going to opt to throw that on the Guide Select rod, which has a softer, more parabolic blank, kind of like a big overgrown crankbait rod. Soft swim bait, it's got a jig hook on it. A large soft bait like that, the fish has a chance to really buckle down on it. You've got to be able to move the bait inside the fish's mouth in order to get a hook set. So I'm going to go on a little faster action rod, which will fall under the category of the Dobbin 795 Mike Long swim bait rod.
Where are we here? Best swim baits for Tonka. Dream Smasher.
Yep.
I have caught them well on that. Actually, I have caught
on the rocks.
Dream Smasher's good. Yep, on the rocks. The gill.
On the deep
bait.
rock.
I'm betting you get around some of them gill post spawn bite when those bluegills are spawning. I bet you
A
get
swim
bad
jig
fish
with a
ones.
big boot tail on the back's real good that time of year too.
Floating mat lures hardgill on a swim shot rig around the rocks doesn't work too badly either. I hate to tell everybody my secrets, but it's not going to cost me.
Hey, you don't get on the show without divulging the goods, just so you know. We don't want to hear that. We tell them.
I'm putting out tonight. About your dinner?
No, I don't think so.
Do you
glasses of wine?
Do you think that on a soft body swim bait, a smooth, even retrieve is better than letting the bait die? How often do you change up your cadence on a slow bite day? If I could, can I just say something about the small, like coming to baits like the Huddleston, the Dream Smasher? I actually have a video on my website that I was throwing a Dream Smasher. And one thing, my cadence changed so much. That was something that
You gotta feel it.
You
man.
Really got to feel it, and you got to trick them into biting. You really do. You got to feel it, and sometimes picking your size and the rate of fall is so critical because it makes that tail do different things as it's falling, and they bite that so often. So definitely, I'm always changing my cadence, trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I'm just trying to feel my way through there,
I think that's what the else one.
I get kind of hung up and come off,
yep.
I'm letting it go.
And then they might bite.
And,
really,
as fast as I can go and keep bottom, and then I start to lose bottom, I'll slow it down. You just gotta feel it out, I guess is the best way to describe it.
Alice asks, is a wide glide better or a tight glide?
I don't know that it's a better or worse question. It's sort of a situational deal. Sometimes maybe they want something that doesn't have quite as wide of a glide, that's a little tighter S pattern. Sometimes maybe they really want that directional change. That really is something that is dictated by the fish's mood. There's no right, wrong, good or bad in it yet.
All right. Kenny's asking a question I know is geared towards you. So
what's up, Kenny?
What is the best split ring to use on a big bait, such as a 9-inch MS? I missed it.
It's an MS Slammer.
MS Slammer, and how do you attach it such that it will not stay spread open on bigger crew eyes?
I'm honestly not an expert on split rings. I know the who makes the Hyperwire. It's is it Decoy? No, it's not Decoy.
I'll tell you, man.
No, I don't remember who makes it. Google it. Your Google maker will help you. The Hyperwire is a well-known sturdy split ring. I actually also like the Eagle Laser Claw oval shaped ones, Kenny. They make a 60-pound and an 80-pound. The oval shape on them helps you to tie your knot in a secure spot on the split ring, which keeps you from coming to the overlap point. Because everybody knows if you tie your knot and you're in between that overlap, and there's potentially a sharp edge there that could cut your line. So I do like those. And Owner makes them. Owner Hyperwire is probably the most popular, well-known, strong split ring for big bait usage.
All right, catch your breath because the questions keep coming for you. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Eric, glider. This is from Deep Matai.
Matey,
Deep
Yaman Matey. What's up, Deep?
Eric, glider versus wedge-tail baits in the mid-column, parentheses, colder water. Any particular conditions to look out for? I seem to get only follows on the 250s and catch a few fish on the HUDs. Thanks, Deep.
Deep. I don't know your fishing style.
Badass name, dude.
It is a badass name. Deep. We're running Deep around here. Deep, I don't know that there's a connection between which bait is going to get bit better than the other. I think if you're getting a lot of follows on your big glide bait, at least this is how it was for me early on. It took a while for me to, actually a couple of seasons, to really figure out how to manipulate the baits and make them do different things and run them in different cadences. Where I stopped getting follows and started getting more bites was when I really started to vary up my retrieve a lot within each and every cast, where I might go 2 cranks or a crank and a half super fast as I can, and then let it pause, and then just barely crawl it for a couple of turns, and then stop again, and then give the rod a pop so the bait does like a 360 freak out move in the water. I'm constantly changing my retrieve from start to finish within every single cast, and my bite ratio and bite to boat ratio jumps through the roof once I started doing that. I don't want to assume that you're fishing it slow and steady all the time, but if you find yourself getting into a groove and not paying attention to what you're doing and just working the bait in one particular way, challenge yourself to make a conscious, concerted effort to vary up or retrieve all day long, and you'll probably turn some of those lookers into biters by doing that.
One thing I want to say, I'm very excited that this is recorded because I'm sitting here looking at questions, not really retaining the information you're spitting. So I know I'm going to watch the recorded version.
Let's keep banging them. We got a bunch.
How deep can you effectively fish any soft swim bait? A lot of that's going to depend on the size that you're fishing. But you can fish them deep. I've caught them.
2 ounce jig head in there and fishing 80 feet of water. There ain't no limitations to that.
In that Dream Smasher video, I was catching them out of 40, and that's deep. I mean, that's out there, man. You know, that's out there catching them on it. So you can definitely, modify it the way you got to do it. Use the jig heads to do it and get it down there.
Give anything enough time, it'll be on the bottom.
Man, I've never fished for smallmouth in tidal water, but Adam Kane is asking any advice for finding the bigger smallies in tidal water.
In tidal water, anytime smallmouths are in current, they really relate to current seams. I guess I don't have a ton of experience on tidal water, but I'm assuming those current seams are always changing as the water levels are going up and down. So that's just going to be kind of fish by the seat of your pants type stuff. Yeah, and they'll somehow be related to a current seam where they can, sit in semi-slack water and have a lot of water moving right in front of them. And especially with tidal, that's going to be changing by the hour, half hour, maybe less than that. I know river smallmouths every few inches of water level, they'll be on totally different spots. So on tidal water, I'm assuming they're using multiple spots throughout the course of the day.
Eric, that Mats lure, you think it would be good on Gunnersville?
Yes.
It's a slow sink, question mark?
The slow sink is an option. If you're talking about the hard gills, they're available in floating, heavy floating, extra slow sink, medium sink, fast sink, you name it, you pick. If you're talking about the soft baits, they're generally a moderate sink rate. As far as like the Ultimate Gill and the YouTube Gill series, those are generally a more moderate sink rate. They sit upright on the bottom. There is a floater made in the YouTube Gill with a flat tail on it that's considered a dead stick bait, but I hope that answers your question.
Do you need special baits for reels? I'm sorry, do you need special reels for baits, big baits?
Yes, you do. It really boils down to a couple of things. One being line capacity, because you're running heavier lines. So if you're running a 200 series reel and you're trying to spool it up with 25-pound test line, at the end of a long cast, you find yourself emptying out that spool. And when you do that, you end up hurting yourself and being able to keep up with a surging fish, for example. So you get bit at the end of a long cast, and you're all the way down to your knot on the spool. You're trying to reel frantically as fast as you can to catch up to that fish and get a hook set. It can hurt you there. And not to mention the number of inches of line that you pick up when you do a crank on your reel, when you have an empty spool compared to when you have a full or even half full spool, can have a great impact on your presentation. And when you're talking about fishing a glide bait where you're just barely wanting to connect to the bait and pick up the slack to your bait in order to get it to swing one way or the other, the difference in a quarter turn on your reel handle can make all the difference in what the bait's doing on the other end. So you want to eliminate as much guesswork as possible and have a reel that's as fully spooled as you can get away with at the end of a long cast, so you know exactly what a quarter turn on that reel handle translates to at the end of a 150-foot cast.
Yeah, and you definitely want a quality reel. I mean, something that's serious heavy-duty gears in it and a solid metal frame, something that's not flexing on it. You're putting a lot of torque on these reels with these big baits and big fish. So definitely something really quality. I know for Daiwa, Zillion HD is a really nice reel they make. Solid metal frame, big oversized handle.
The Tula HD is a good one too.
That one as well. You're not going to get by with a chintzy reel here throwing big baits. It's no different than a big plug or an A-rig or something.
What's a big dog, Alexa?
Yeah, the Lexus, they make those too. You're definitely just going to want something quality, something with beefy gears. It's going to hold up a lot longer. I mean, I'm sure if you took a $40, $50 cheap reel out there, you could burn it up pretty quick. So, you know, this is where a little more bang for your buck goes a long ways from these big baits.
Eric, let's touch this one quick. A lot of these questions came early in the webinar before we got to it, but just in case you're still on, they missed it. Eric, why frog hooks on some baits?
Basically for weedlessness. It just lets you get in and out, lets you get a bait up under a dock. You know, you're going to come past the pole rather than that front hook grabbing the pole. You can work them through all sorts of vegetation, from lily pads to cabbage to milfoil, hydrilla, cattails, and tules. It just is really a way to put the bait where you want to put it, because that's where the fish is at. And not to mention the spacing between the hook points on a frog hook is different than how it's set up on a treble hook. Think about the last time you hooked a frogfish. You probably had both hooks right in the roof of its mouth, and it was pinned in there and going nowhere. Same thing happens when they bite the frog hook on a hard bait.
What gear ratio reel do you prefer for swim bait fishing? I like 6 speeds. That's my favorite. I feel like I can slow it down when I need to slow it down and still have the quickness on the reel to be able to catch up and get them in there, and still have winching power. And that's my favorite. But
I agree with you.
I'm with you too.
Jason is asking. Oh, hold on. I'm not going to be able to know that one, Jason. Sorry. I'll refer him back. If fish keep following your bait, never strike it. What else can you do to change other than the retrieve speed? Mind you, a lot of these came before we touched them in the webinar. So
I think you just vary up your retrieve as much as you can. Not just speed, but pausing it and twitching it and using a certain cadence in your twitching, and really paying attention to what the lure is doing and how it reacts to you, and just switch it up.
Yeah.
Or just throw a wacky Cinco, and he'll come back and he'll eat it.
Hey, it's the same way on soft baits too. The steadier and slower you reel it, I feel like the more likely you are to have follows, and the more erratic you move your bait, the more likely you're going to get strikes. I mean, that might not always be the best way to fish it. You know, slow and steady might be the deal, but if you're getting fish looking at baits and they aren't eating it, definitely little twitches, little quick handle turns, something to, or, you know, killing it, something to make it more erratic, make them react to it more, I guess.
Yeah, my first, I was throwing a 6-inch soft-sided swim bait, cast it, reeling it in real clear water and off of a ledge wall, and all of a sudden I see a 7-pounder come up right behind it, and he followed it, and as soon as I killed that bait, he just opened his gills and flushed it. And so, I mean, you just got to do what you got to do to get the fish in the boat.
See, yeah, we're not so different.
No, we're not. Good for eyes. We talked about that. Walleyes will eat the heck out of them.
Oh, yeah.
Especially little swim baits. I don't know about the big ones, but the little ones, I catch a lot of them on.
I've actually done better on big soft baits than I have on small ones for big walleyes.
We like to tease the walleye fish. Remember,
5 to 10 pound walleyes have no problem.
They got big appetites
5, 6
on
inch soft baits.
Oh, for sure. All day.
Gary is asking, explain why you would select to use a pre-rigged soft bait why unrigged is better. Why would you prefer pre-rigged when unrigged offers unlimited options? It's a good question.
It is.
Fair question.
It is.
I like that.
Pre-rigged baits are generally much more finely tuned to sink at a certain rate. If you want a slow sinking bait you can keep high in the water column, that's where you're going to need a HUD. Our rate of fall 0, which is basically a suspender / floater, or a rate of fall 5. So basically, a pre-rigged bait gives you a more finely tuned, true running bait, even in a super slow sinking presentation, generally speaking.
Okay. What's the best rod and reel setup for swim baits on a budget, mainly Huddleston's 6 to 8 inch?
I don't like the word best because it's very subjective. It's really an opinion. I'm personally very partial to the Okuma Guide Select series of rods. the medium heavy size is great for 1 to 3 ounce class baits, maybe up to 4 ounce class baits. They're double extra heavy. It was good for everything right up to a Hinkle trout, 10, 11 ounce class bait, and they're right around $100, $125. Daiwa has a few options out now as well.
Yeah, we got a swim bait line for your bigger baits, and honestly, a lot of your 6-inch soft baits, they can probably get by with a lot of flipping sticks, can't they?
Oh yeah.
The same rod you're using throw your jigs and your Texas rigs on, you can definitely get by throwing 6-inch swim baits on those, no problem.
Oh yeah.
Once you get up into the 8+ inch baits, then you're probably talking a serious swim bait, 8 foot heavy, more moderate actions. But yeah, I think a flipping stick will handle most of your lighter stuff.
As far as the reel goes, that's going to depend on your price point and your personal preferences. Daiwa's made some great options like these guys have talked about. Lexa, Tetula, even the Luna for the round reel guys. Some guys really prefer round reels. I like low profile. The Shimano Curado 300 series is a great reel. Okuma reels, the Citrix and the Komodo 364 size is a great reel. It really just depends on your price point. There's no best, there's no worst. It's a matter of what you like the feel of and what you can afford.
And I think if you're going to do one or the other, if you're real tight on a setup, put the money into the reel. You can definitely there's definitely $100 rods on the market that will suit you for most stuff you need, especially when you're throwing these big baits. Put your money into the reel. It's just going to hold up. It's going to last longer. It's just going to be a better deal all around.
Yep.
Then we got what kind of retrieve cadence do you use? Fast, slow, constant, or crank and pause? I think we've touched on that a few times. Definitely tend to mix it up. What is Swimbait Universe?
I think we got a joker on our hands. I'm going to guess this guy's name, who's anonymous, is probably Wayne. Maybe not. I don't know. Swimbait Universe is as far as I know, I can't say officially, as far as I know, the largest interactive online swimbait enthusiast community on the interwebs.
Cool.
Swimbait Universe.
Who are they?
Somebody asked who we were.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, I can tell you. I was
Douglas. He was in the bathroom.
Yeah, it was. That was me. I'm like, who is this Swimbait? I'll tell you, dude. Growing up with you guys, I mean, literally, Eric, I owe you so much when it comes to where I'm at with fishing today. I mean, you got me back into it big time when it was, but living in Tennessee, all of a sudden the Swimbait Universe was getting huge. And I was like, who are these guys? And it was my own homeboys. Like, when I came to look at it, it was you guys back here doing big things. So,
well, I appreciate
you deserve that. You deserve that.
The good words, Josh. You know what? I appreciate you in the same way, because I don't think I'd probably be a Swimbait guy right now if you hadn't.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, if you hadn't gotten me into it. I think you had a punker. You had a couple of HUDs.
Weedless HUD.
And maybe a Matt Lures, or did I buy them?
No, and Real Prey.
Yeah.
Joe's always been good to me at Real Prey. I've always thrown those.
Yeah.
And, yep. Dave Sindrich.
Can you feel the love, folks?
Yeah. Come on. All right. Where were we? What question did you just do?
I don't know. What is Swimbait Universe?
What is Swimbait Universe? Okay.
It's the place to be.
Do you have a good time of year? What time? Rob's asking what time of year is best for swimbaits.
Whenever the water is open and you have opportunity to go fishing.
Okay.
Period.
Because guess what? They eat that big fish, eat big baits all the time.
All the time. Fish are in the water, the fish are eating. And if the fish are eating, they're eating other fish.
We touched on this, Christian, but I'm going to have him run it by it again, because to me, I think it's very important. Favorite, floating, slow sinking, or fast sinking?
If I had to pick one, floating. For the same reason as what we touched on before. It's easy to make something that floats sink. It's very difficult to make something that sinks float. So if I had to limit it to one, floating. That's me, though. I don't know about you guys.
No, I agree with you. I'm same way with jerk baits.
The same deal, yeah.
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 You can always add weight. You can't take it away.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Man, Vince, I want to help you out here. What does this say?
The stinger hook modification, the one on the right, what is that in front weighting it down? Oh, the one on the right. That was okay. Yeah, what you're talking about is. Can we get to the slides again still? Or
I don't know
okay.
how, dude. Yeah.
Okay. I think
Seth and I
think the one you're talking
the
about.
boss is gone. Bree's gone.
Yeah, the one.
Bree's here. We're good.
The one on the right. I know what that was. That was the Rhett Wheeler burner, 7-inch burner bait, and what you're seeing hanging off the front of it was a 1.5 ounce Hog Farmer. Thank you.
It ain't that big, but I got the dig.
Yeah, here you go. That's what you're seeing off the front of that bait. It's just a big old football jig head with a screw lock on it. Thank you for being on point, Seth. So that's all you're seeing is a jig.
BJ Smith is asking what size frog hooks you're using on that 250.
It depends. Depends on what I want to do with it. I use 2-aught, 3-aught, and 4-aught size frog hooks in like 5 different styles. And the reason for the variety is because they all weigh a fraction of a gram different than the other. So it depends. If I want it to be a hard floater, which is one of my favorite things, then I'm running a 2-aught on the front and a 2-aught on the back in that cheap buck frog hook. If I want it to be a super slow floater, then I'll put a 3-aught on the front and keep the 2-aught on the back. I also like the Owner saltwater double hooks, which is a beast of a hook. It's like a tuna sea wash style, real heavy grade hook on there. Those are a lot heavier. They're actually heavier than the stock depths hooks, and I'll use those if I want to make it a little faster sinking bait. These are just ways to fine-tune the weighting on it without having to pull the skin and actually redo the weights. So that's a kind of multifaceted question. I'll just change it up on the fly to make it sink or float how I want it to.
I like it. One thing, we still got literally so many people on live. We lost a few, but so many sticking around for the Q&A, so we're going to definitely keep them coming.
You asked a question, we're answering.
And here's one. An anonymous viewer is asking, is there any way I can get you guys to take off your shirts? And yes, yes, but this will no longer be a free webinar.
Yeah, you got
we're
paid
charged.
for that.
That's what I'm saying, dude. This will no longer be free. All right.
Who was that? It was anonymous.
Of course.
Wayne. What's up, Wayne?
John asks, Eric, what do you think about both the Matt Lures models?
Well, Matt Lures makes a lot more than 2 models.
Right, but
I think very highly about all of them. If you're talking about the gills,
probably 2,
yeah. Talk about the U2 gill or the ultimate gill. Those are your soft baits. The U2 is the little guy, and the ultimate gill is the big guy. Or the hard gill series. I think very highly of all of them. They're probably, in my opinion, the most realistic looking bluegill imitating baits on the market. Not only in their profile, but right down to the scale detail, the gill detail, the eye detail, the fin detail, all of it. It just looked like a real bluegill, and I love them.
We got a swim bait question here that I'm going to take, and I'm going to come through like a boss on this, and I know you're going to back me up, Eric. Craig Laffler asks, I'm in New York. We don't have double-digit monsters. Would I want to downsize the swim baits? Would a HUD 68 be too big for 5 or 6 pounders?
No.
It's mine.
Huh? Oh,
absolutely not.
Sorry.
No way. As a matter of fact, we have not shown you a bait today that is too big for a 5 or 6 pounder. No. A 5 or 6 pounder eat absolutely anything we've showed you today. Matter of fact, the 3 pounder would probably eat most everything that we've shown you today. So please don't back
for sure.
Don't back down. But at the same time, if you're not getting the bites, start scaling it down a little bit. But a HUD 68, no, it'll get smoked by a 5 or 6 pounder. No problem. Anything to say on that?
Yeah.
No, I agree, 100%.
I got this. We talked about the real ratio, but this is a good question. Pete asked, "How do you store your high dollar swim baits?" I got a few that you've hooked me up with in there. I don't know a good way to carry them.
Well, let me grab it. I'll show you real quick.
Seth Feider.
What up?
He'll be right back. This is pretty slick.
Some guys like to use your bait wraps, and there's a bunch of different companies that make bait wraps. I'm not real partial to them, only because swim baits are generally real tail sensitive. You want to keep those tails in a straight position so that they continue to run right for you. So I use a gun case. In this case, this is a Plano 4-pistol case. Picked it up off Amazon for like $18 or something like that. 1-pistol case is fine for a day trip. 2-pistol case is fine. The 4-pistol case is nice because it gives you a lot of room in there. It's padded top and bottom. Keeps your tails nice and straight. You can flip it over. and access. The other one's on the bottom side there. The storage capacity is tremendous. They stow away nice in your boat. They fit in the same kind of compartments as your regular bait boxes do. They keep everything neat and tidy. They don't bang against each other. You don't get a bunch of box rash. And that's my solution.
Yeah, I like it. Looks good.
Thank you.
Nicholas Gaylor asks, what's a good reel for the new rod I want? LOL. I like it. I like the confidence. Hopefully it ends up being
another question before that.
What's the biggest bass y'all caught on a swim bait? Eric?
Mine, about 6.5, a little over 6, like 6'10".
I don't know about that. I caught a 7 deuce small.
That's a big one. So I got a 7-pound largemouth on a swim bait, but a couple of them, but not much bigger.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of people that are tuned in that think we're just strictly talking, down south and big 10, 12, 13, 16 pounders. Man, we're not. I mean, we use them day in, around here, and we're coming to you out of Minnesota, so we use them to catch big fish here.
We got little ones.
Rob is asking, Rob Melendez, if we ever dredge the bottom with swim baits. We do.
That's how I'm typically fishing.
Me too.
Hard bottom, open water.
Especially soft baits.
Yeah,
soft
baits.
Treble hook ones, different deal.
Soft bait, top hook, or a jig head. I'm typically maintaining some sort of bottom contact.
Ooh, Benjamin Morton, my kind of guy here. Can we talk line to bait connection knots?
Yeah. Who wants to start it off?
What are we talking?
Line to bait
Straight
connection.
line to bait?
Yep.
Realistically, a polymer for the size line we're using, it's big enough. A polymer is going to be a strong player. Maybe if you got a fluorocarbon like a San Diego Jam might be a hair better, but that really shines more with a lighter line. Once you're 20 plus, I think a polymer pretty much take care of all your needs.
Brian is asking, as far as swim baits on Tonka, is it more paddle tail or like Biovex jointed? Both will work great. The Biovex jointed, though, is more of a topwater bait. Definitely goes up on top. Killer bait, but the paddle tails you can swim out deeper. That jointed bait is, again, that's going to be more your topwater style jointed bait, and quivers across the top. Great stuff as always. John's asking if you had to pick 2 to 3. I know hard to do. Starter baits. What would you suggest for starters?
It's a good question.
That's a very good question.
Very good question. I think you need a glide bait. I think you need a multi-segmented hard bait, and I think you need a HUD.
I like that.
You need a HUD.
You can throw out a glide and a multi-joint for them?
Yeah. As far as a glide bait goes, if you're wanting to get your feet wet and get numbers and get a little taste of it, that depth's 175. River to CS waiver, 200 size will do the trick for you. Roman made negotiator. Those are all numbers baits. They all get a ton of bites and put fish in the boat. As for a multi-segmented bait, if I had to pick one today, it'd be a Matt Lures floating hard gill.
What about Trident Mike Bullshad?
Trident Mike Bullshad makes an amazing shad bait. They catch a lot of fish.
I like that.
We don't have shad around here.
Yeah, probably depending on the part of the country you're in.
Right.
Bluegill versus a shad bait.
Yep.
And and then I like some of the again, so much just depends on where you live. So which ones would be your starters would be a little bit different. Minnesota, if you're in Alabama.
Yep.
Alabama, high-powered gliding gizzard being awesome. I mean, that's one that everybody would like to have. Depths 250 be a big one.
Yep.
But yeah, definitely just more so where you're at.
And to get a little more specific on the soft bait on the HUD, if I had to have one, it'd be a 68 special rate of fall 5 with a jig hook, the top jig hook.
That's the deal. Brigham Vang asks, how do you guys feel about using musky rods?
It's a label. It depends on the rod.
Yeah, I mean, a musky rod ain't much different than a beefed up flipping stick or a swim bait rod. I mean, call it what you want, but
I think your old school musky rods, the classic musky rod that guys think of as your typical broomstick that's extra fast action and good to hold a 2-pound bait, it's not going to do you a bit of good.
No, you want a little bend in that rod. That'll actually help you throwing them big baits too. If you got an absolute pool cue, you're just not going to get any distance or accuracy on your cast.
Right.
Brendan Fowler asked, you didn't talk about the line on your HUD rod. Please do. It would be very helpful.
Line on the HUD rod for me depends on where and when and how I'm fishing it. Again, around heavy cover, I'm going to lean more towards braid just so I can get it through there. If I'm fishing it in deeper water and I'm trying to maintain bottom contact, I'm going to go to fluoro. If I'm fishing a little bit generally more open water or above a weed edge or a ledge or something like that, keeping it less than 10 feet from the surface, I'm going to opt for monofilament.
Alice asks, what are your thoughts on feathered trebles? I see these on some of your baits sometimes, and I don't know. I'd love to know. What's the deal with the feathered treble on the bottom of those gill baits and stuff?
I think a front feathered treble can be good, especially if the red, it looks like it's kind of bleeding a little bit. It might give a fish a focal point, something that they want to aim for when they come to eat the bait. However, a feather creates drag. You have on a glide bait, like on a depth 250, for example, the ones that I have all came stock with feather hooks. There was a noticeable increase in the glide and the free swimming properties of that bait once I took off the feather hooks and went to unfeathered hooks. So,
all right, guys, we are pushing 10 o'clock. We said we wouldn't go much past that. We're going to, just real quick, I'm going to start jumping around, just grabbing some. Couple quick questions. Try to go into rapid fire, answer them really quick. 5 minutes rapid fire.
You guys answer because I'm not good at.
We're rapid fire. I'll cut you
I might not
off.
be able to answer half of these.
We're gonna start with some of the newest questions and go backwards. Those are for the people that are still on. We still got literally a bunch of people on, so I want to keep it going. Eric, do you ever use baits that specifically imitate golden shiner on Minnesota lakes that have them? Any luck in doing so?
Yes. Because you're basically just talking about your standard basic bait fish profile and color. You know, you got a little bit golden, a little bit silver in there, maybe a white belly in it. Yeah, absolutely.
Richie's asking, snap, split rings, or direct tie on any hard bait?
Kind of depends what you want to do with it. In some applications, fishing a glide bait, you might want to tie direct. Some people say you get a little bit more sideways distance by doing it that way, compared to having a snapper or a split ring on there, which frees up the nose action a bit, but allows the bait to more easily 180 and turn around on itself rather than turning 90 degrees and swimming out to the side. So again, it just depends on what you're trying to do. Generally, I'll prefer a loose connection like a split ring, or what I get out of a crimped leader like I use all the time.
All right, Fighter, me and you, how much time would you give it in a tournament? You know, I'll tell you what, I'll give it a whole hell of a lot more time if I got a decent bag already in the box. How long are you going to give a big swim bait in the tournament?
A big swim bait? That really depends on where you're at and what's going on. I mean, if you go to a slugfest place, there's no reason you can't throw something like that all day. You know, if you go to a scroungy place like the Ohio River, something like that's just, you know, you're fishing for a 14-inch bass, and that's just something you're never going to pick up. But, you know, you go to some of these California lakes or Texas lakes or maybe even some Tennessee River lakes when they're peaked on fire. I mean, you could literally throw a swim bait all day long. Andy
already replied to that. Thanks, Andy. You're the man, dude. Zhang Yang asks, Eric, this one's to you. How often do you use bigger swim baits in tournament fishing? I fish the Delta, and I always have 1 or 2 big bait for the early morning bite. Day, depending on the time of the year. Smallest I've thrown is a bull shooter junior and a black dog shell cracker, and the biggest I've thrown during a tournament is a 9-inch slammer.
Zang, if I was to jump back into tournament fishing, I would fish swim baits 85% of the time like I do now in my leisure fishing.
Right. That Delta's I went out there last year. That's an amazing place. That's full of the right kind of size of fish you're looking for. I mean, there's the amount of 5 to 8 pound fish in the Delta is unbelievable. That'd be kind of a place where I think a guy could maybe just buckle down and throw that big bait all day and fish for 5-6 bites. You know, that you're definitely around a lot of the right quality fish for big baits there.
Yep.
Joshua asks, is there any space in swim baits for light wire hooks?
A lot of my smallmouth fishing is done with light wire jig heads. The big baits, that's probably not gonna play, but I usually use a pretty soft rod for the smallmouth. I'm fishing on fluorocarbon, and a light wire hook's all I really need to get a good hook set out there. So a lot of the jig heads on just your smaller 4-inch less boot tails, I'm actually fishing a light wire jig head on.
To add to that, light wire, there's a time and place for light wire and big hard baits as well. And that's for manipulating your sink rates or your float rates. And for that matter, I'm more worried about getting the hook penetrated and into the fish's mouth, and then worry about getting it in the boat, rather than having a real heavy gauge hook on there that you, especially on a long cast, might have to really buckle down to get a hook set.
Hopefully you can touch on this one because I think it's a great question. Benjamin asked, why not a loop knot to increase action? Saltwater guys have several loop knots that are capable of amazing knot strength.
It's a great idea.
I like it.
Yep, it's a great idea. To have that free movement without having to add any weight to the bait, to the presentation at all, is a great idea.
Which soft bait are you using on the Hog Farmer shaky head with stinger?
That is a custom-made bait by a small batch bait maker friend of mine, whose name is Rhett Wheeler. That is his 7-inch burn bait.
Someone asked, I Googled Swimbait Universe and I can't find the website. Bring them to speed.
Yeah, Swimbait Universe is a private group on Facebook. We do not have a website outside of Facebook now, aside from our Instagram page. So if you're not on Facebook, sign up for Facebook. Go into the search engine, type in Swimbait Universe. When you find the closed group that has 15,000 members, you found the right place.
I hope I'm saying the name right. Chen He says, hey, Eric, have you tried glide baits with your swim shot rig? I thought it might be nice for winter dead sticking, but it might be too difficult to work.
Nope, it's fantastic. Yes, I fished it. It is awesome. It looks great in the water. It's easy to fish. As long as your drop line going to the weight is ever so slightly shorter than your leader going to the bait, you won't experience any tangle problems on the cast or on the retrieve. It's an outstanding presentation.
Brett just asked you if you're drinking beer.
Yes.
Yeah. We're sitting here talking to y'all. Of course we are.
It's a champagne beer.
That's what I'm saying. How should the water temp affect your bait selection?
We kind of covered this before as well. I would prefer to have multiple lures tied on to appeal to inactive and active feeding moods, regardless of the water temperature. I don't care what time of year it is. You can find them deep, you can find them shallow, you can find them in between, and they're either moving or they're not. So I don't like to box. I don't like to box my approach in that way.
Seth, specific one to you. We're getting close. I know we're all starving here. We got quite the crew here. We're gonna cut her down in just a minute here. Seth, do you prefer braid to mono on your spinning rod with paddle tails, and what knot do you use?
No, I actually use braid to fluoro. Probably gonna use a FG knot or a modified Albright to connect the line. I'm not looking for a lot of. I don't need the stretch fishing with a single hook. I'm not fishing treble hook baits, so I'm going with the fluoro just for invisibility, and if I got to back the drag off a little, I do.
All right, that's it.
We got 'em?
We're gonna cut it. No, we don't. But we said we have literally another 100 to go through. We don't have time for it. We'll try to address a bunch of these. Maybe a part 2 to swim bait. We can take much of these questions, and this might be something in the future. I definitely like it. All right, we got a bunch of people. We're in on it, guys. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Tune in for our next one. We'll keep them coming. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.